Hello everybody and welcome back to more Metroid Prime Randomized. Now, this episode is going to be slightly different because there was an issue with recording the audio. Basically, the head of my microphone became unscrewed, and so it just wasn't picking up any audio. I didn't know this until the recording was finished. Well, okay, it was picking up some audio, but it's so quiet that it's not usable. Here's a sample of what the video actually sounds like.
However, the other path eventually leads to a boss Spider-Man. Without that item, you can't leave the boss's chair.
And yeah, you might now understand why I decided to re-record it. Not re-record it, but, just dubbing over the footage now. So at this point in the game, my plan was to go into the Space Pirate Fortress. Now, for some reason, I was stalling and not moving. I think it's because the door's locked. Yep. So basically, in order to open this, we would need the thermal visor, which we currently do not have. So I think that's like a back entrance. No. Okay, no, that's the entrance to a boss. So basically, now we are actually heading into the Space Pirate Fortress to find the weapon that is in the item that is in the spot of the thermal visor. Now, later on in the episode, I do kind of cheat a little bit. I decide, just in case it's not there, I'm going to use a save state in case I get soft locked for not having the thermal visor, which I'm very glad I did. But yeah, this was a weird one to have to re-record. Because I'm pretty sure half the episode is me looking at my map wondering what to do next. So, since we have all this open time to talk about something, and I don't really have anything planned, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the story of Metroid up to the point we're at. So, at the beginning of the timeline is the first Metroid game, released for the NES. You play as Samus Aran, a bounty hunter who is called to infiltrate an enemy fortress on planet Zebes, which is ruled over by the Space Pirates, where you have to fight off Mother Brain, Ridley, and Kraid, who are the leader of these Space Pirates. The end goal is to eradicate the planet of Metroids, which are these bioweapons that the Space Pirates are using, and Mother Brain is controlling telepathically, and then just destroy the Space Pirate operations. At the end of the game, Samus escapes, and you find out that Samus is a woman, if you did well enough. Then came Metroid Zero Mission, which was it was a pretty good remake of Metroid. It added a lot of new content and additional story elements afterwards, where Samus' ship crash lands back onto planet Zebes, where you then have to fight through the remaining Space Pirate forces, and then go back and collect a new power suit, because the one that Samus was using in the first Metroid was basically not an original power suit, or not the power suit that we know today. And her original power suit was destroyed in an explosion. Well then, for this game, Samus is called to the frigate Orpheon, which is a space pirate ship that sent out an SOS distress signal that the Galactic Federation had Samus investigate. That ship blows up, and so Samus escapes to the nearby planet of Talon 4, where there are space pirate operations, and that's basically this game. Alright, now, let me just start that up again. Yeah, so I gotta have to go back and think of some things to actually talk about while basically this quick movie is playing. I thought, why not bring up a list of Metroid games, if my computer will cooperate, and just kind of say my thoughts on them. So the first one is obviously Metroid on the NES. This one is a bit rough to go back and play nowadays, just because there's so much that the newer games have added that are just so helpful that you don't get in any of the later ones. But, it introduced a lot of the series main characters such as Samus, Mother Brain, Ridley, Kraid. Brought the Morph Ball, the general progression where you usually get Morph Ball, then missiles or bombs, and then you're basically free to explore the planet. The areas in the game all kind of look the same after a while, which is very unfortunate because it makes it very easy to get lost in the caverns because, there's no map. But overall, it's a pretty solid game. But one of the best parts about it, in my opinion, is the password system, because there are just some really weird ones you can put in. So if you put in Justin Bailey, probably the most famous code, you get to play as Samus with green hair and basically a pink leotard. That's just an interesting cosmetic change that you normally can't get unless you beat the game in under an hour, I think, which is pretty insane, so I'm glad that the password generator allows you to do that. But other interesting ones are Narpus Sword, which basically starts you off with a whole bunch of missiles and energy tanks. Actually, I think Narpus Sword gives you all of the items in the game. Yeah, infinite energy and missiles, so you're basically just gonna wreck everything you come across. Then there's also Engage Ridley Motherfucker, which is a pretty funny one. It crashes the game, and actually when Metroid was re-released on the 3DS as a Virtual Console title, that passcode would brick some systems if you tried putting it in, which is just so funny that code causes so many problems that it can brick modern hardware. Like, that just kind of blows my mind. Well, for Metroid, I ended up giving that game, I think, a 6 out of 10. Maybe go back and play it once or twice normally, maybe once with a randomizer, but there's just not a whole lot of reason to return to that one very often. So the next one I have is Metroid 2, The Return of Samus. This one was released for the Game Boy in 1991. Now, obviously because it was a Game Boy game, it doesn't look very good, either by, 1991 standards or by current standards. It's kind of just, this pea soup green color. It's just very unappealing. But this game actually brought us a lot of the Samus's visual designs that get carried over into later games, such as the various suit having the giant shoulder pads. And this actually had a very detailed Samus sprite for how just kind of muddy everything else looked, which was impressive. So this game followed Samus going to the planet SR388 to rid the galaxy of Metroids entirely. So the whole purpose of the game is you're hunting down Metroids, and at the end you fight the Queen Metroid, where after you kill it, then Samus rescues a Metroid hatchling and gives it to the Galactic Federation. Now, this game suffers from a lot of the same issues that the first Metroid suffered from, where it had very similar looking areas and no map system, so it's very easy to get lost. I feel like items this time are a little easier to locate, which is nice, but it still takes a bit of time to get 100%. This is, again, a game that you might play once or twice and then not revisit, really. And for that, I think I also give it a 6 out of 10, but personally I would put it higher than the original Metroid just because it feels more like modern Metroid, which I like. 3 years later, we got Super Metroid in 1994. This is considered by many to be the best game in the series, and I don't quite agree, but I do think it is one of the best ones. It has very detailed, beautiful backgrounds, very beautiful sprites. And so the game is basically a pseudo-remake of the first Metroid, but with a different plot. You go back to planet Zebes to once again destroy space pirate forces. who have captured the last remaining Metroid in an attempt to either breed more or create their own, which they end up doing. So you once again have to make it through the planet and fight Mother Brain, who has a new weird like monster form. It's actually kind of cool, but it also looks like an old woman with just like gray frizzy afro hair, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it is definitely the first of the modern Metroid games and set the standard for all the 2D Metroid games to follow. And a lot of the designs in the game influenced the Prime series. The gameplay is super tight. Wall jumps take a little bit of time to get used to. And it's really fun to revisit, especially with the randomizers, because the game is just built in a way where you can get around so many different places, even if you don't have, you know, what's technically the proper item you're supposed to have. Things like wall jumping and bomb jumping really just open up the whole game for you to just run through during a randomizer. And even without a randomizer, you can skip significant portions of the game and come back later when they're easier when you get later items. So this one, I definitely think it's a 9 out of 10. Kind of loses some points because when you get down to Norfair and then down towards the weird, I forget exactly where it is, but there's like a really sandy area where you encounter the Metroid baby again. It's just kind of the same. All the environments just look the same. There's not a whole lot visually interesting going on. So it's a pretty small area, but, you know, I would give that a 9 out of 10. Then in 2002, we actually get 2 new Metroid games. We get Metroid Fusion, which was also called Metroid 4, which follows up the events of Super Metroid. Samus gets infected by a new parasite known as the X-Parasite, which she then has to get an operation to save her life. In the process, they have to remove and discard pieces of her old suit and build her a completely new one. This suit is actually usable in Metroid Prime if you use the Game Boy Advance link cable and a copy of Metroid Fusion. This one, I think, is the best looking 2D Metroid. It's pretty fun, although it's very linear, so it's hard to do anything out of order, go, you know, exploring like that. And it's actually the first plot-driven Metroid game. There's pretty big monologues from Samus throughout that are a couple of walls of texts long. And there's actually a few more horror aspects than there were in previous 2D Metroids, with the SAX, basically an X-Parasite recreation of Samus, hunting you down. I would definitely recommend this one. I think it might be a little worse than Super Metroid, but I also give it a 9 out of 10. So then Metroid Prime came out, and that's, you know, what I'm playing the randomizer through right now. And I think that this one is just phenomenal. I have beaten this one a few times. This is my first time doing a randomizer for it. So I've already, you know, kind of talked about the story. I've kind of seen it. The gameplay feels super tight. Controls are a little weird. It's kind of like classic Doom, where you have to turn your character tank style instead of strafing. But that gets fixed later on in the Wii versions, in the Metroid Prime trilogy, and in the Wii re-release of the game. So it's not too big a deal if you play those ones. Where this game does kind of fail, in my opinion, is that you don't feel a whole lot of need to go back and backtrack and get all the items you missed. Because for me, I was able to just play through it, go in the directions the game pointed me to go to get new items, where I would then find other items to use, and then I would just head to the final boss. Which, you know, you can do, but the game didn't really make me feel like I had to do it, and it didn't really encourage it either. So I felt like that was kind of weak. But overall, I'd give this one an 8 out of 10. Then, a few years later, in 2004, I believe, we get Metroid Zero Mission, which is a proper remake of the original Metroid. This game looks absolutely beautiful, even if I prefer Metroid Fusion's art style to this one. They kept Samus's design from the original Metroid and worked it into the story, where it was supposedly an older prototype of the power suit, where she then gets a more powered-up power suit in the Chozo Ruins on planet Zebes. This game added a lot of lore to the whole series, which was amazing. It added Samus's backstory, it added more stuff about the Chozo, about who Mother Brain was. But it also added more post-game content, so you got to see what Samus did between Metroid and Metroid Prime. So this was actually the first appearance of her Zero suit, which was named after Zero Mission. This game was amazing. It's actually my favorite 2D Metroid, and I think the only game in the series that I would give a 10 out of 10. Now, shortly after, in 2004 as well, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes came out. This one takes place, I think, a few months after Metroid Prime, and involves Samus going to planet Aether, which is currently under a weird sort of dimensional displacement thing. Like, the planet is split into basically a light and dark world, just like Link to the Past. It was good, but it was a bit too derivative of Metroid Prime, because you have to hunt down these 12 Luminoth artifacts, and it feels basically the exact same as hunting down the Chozo artifacts. It's not bad, but it's not entirely original. The graphics could be a little muddy in places. But overall, it's still a solid game. I'd definitely give it a 7 out of 10. Then we had Prime Pinball that came out in 2005. I personally have not played this one. It is the only one that I haven't played. But I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it's a pinball game. So if you like pinball, you'll like Metroid Prime Pinball. Then 2006, Metroid Prime Hunters was released. This was a DS game, and was actually one of the first Metroid games that I played that got me super into Metroid. It is still a first-person shooter, so aiming using the stylus and the touch screen is super weird, especially when you're playing the Wii U re-release, when you have this massive pad that you have to use to look around. It's pretty good, but the thing that stands out to me the most is the multiplayer, which is incredibly fun when you have a group of people just running around as these different bounty hunters with different abilities. Definitely the most overpowered of which is this guy whose special ability is his sniper rifle, where if he stands still with it, he turns invisible. It's so stupidly broken, but so much fun to play as. Graphics are, it's a first-person shooter on a DS game. It doesn't look good. Not even it doesn't look great, it doesn't look good. But the music was surprisingly good. The boss battles, though, were incredibly repetitive. It was the same 2 boss battles, and then you had a few bounty hunters thrown in that you had to fight. So it's another one of those not great, not terrible ones. Without multiplayer, it would be a 6 out of 10. With multiplayer, it becomes a 7 out of 10. Then in 2007, on the Wii, we got Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. This one was unique because it took advantage of the Wiimote and Nunchuck, so there was a lot of motion control stuff, which actually fit the game pretty well when you were aiming, switching between weapons, calling your gunship to do airstrikes, using the grappling hook. It was a pretty fun experience. I haven't gone back to it yet myself, but I've kind of been wanting to recently, and I think it's my favorite out of the Prime series so far. It has stunning graphics, a great story, NPCs for the first time in a Metroid game, a lot of cool mechanics that they use, and I feel like I want to explore all the different planets that they let you. This one, I would definitely give a 9 out of 10. It misses a few points just because when they focused on the motion controls, they kind of dumbed down a few of the areas so they're not as fun to platform around, basically. It just feels more like a chore. Then in 2010, which is actually 10 years ago to the day that I'm recording the dub of this, Metroid Other M came out. This one was pretty controversial. It featured a heavy focus on plot, and the story was not good. Like, I will fully admit that. The story to Metroid Other M was absolutely terrible. However, looking past that, the visuals were stunning, especially for a Wii game. I would love to see some sort of Other M update on the Switch. You know, maybe they fix some of the story parts, explain the subplots they brought up that never got resolved, maybe do over Samus's voice acting a little bit. But the gameplay to me is the best part of the game. It's pretty flashy, action-packed. It's a third-person shooter for the most part, so you don't have to worry too much about aiming because they give you an auto-aim. The controls are a bit weird at first, but you kind of get used to it. You switch between third-person and first-person by holding the Wii remote either horizontally or pointing at the screen. It's unconventional, but I kind of love it. It was also around that time that I was playing The World Ends With You, which also has a pretty unconventional control scheme, so I was alright with that. But yeah, no, the story is absolute garbage. So in my opinion, it does bring it down, but not quite to the extremes that I've seen other people rank it. I would personally give it a 7 out of 10. Then we went through a bit of a drought. It's not the longest drought. The longest drought came from Super Metroid to Metroid Fusion, which was an 8-year gap. This was only 6 years, from 2010 to 2016, where we got a spin-off game that no one asked for, and nobody really wanted after it was announced. It was Metroid Prime Federation Force, a spin-off where you play as members of the Galactic Federation, just carrying out missions. Now, from a lore standpoint, it did delve deeper into the Galactic Federation, their actions after the Prime games, but before Super Metroid and before Metroid 2. But it was out there in this weird kind of chibi style where you'd be in big mechs and then you could pop out and walk. It was just weird. It's not fun in single player. If you have 4 people playing it, then it can be, it can be pretty fun. It's a 3DS game, so controls don't feel the greatest, especially on new 3DS when you have to live with the little C nub instead of a second slide pad that you can get for the original 3DS. Overall, it just kind of feels uninspired, but there are a few cool plot details that show up at the end, but I couldn't really recommend this one. I'd give that one a 4 out of 10. Then our last release came in 2017. It was also a 3DS game, however it was a 2D Metroid. It was Metroid Samus Returns, and it was a remake of Metroid 2 Return of Samus. The game added a lot of detail, and even though it's a 2D game, the 3D visuals look amazing. It actually helps immerse you into a handheld game, which is very hard to do. It keeps the story basically the same, but it adds a few more hints about the Chozo through the concept art. The soundtrack is great. The addition of a map is great. They changed the looks of the areas so it doesn't look like the same hallways over and over again. This is a very welcome addition to the Metroid series, and I hope that they do more 2D Metroids for the Switch and make it look like this. I definitely give this one a 9 out of 10. It loses a few points on boss difficulty because the bosses are either just mindless, you just hit one button, or they are some of the hardest bosses I've ever had to face. And that is basically where we are in terms of Metroid games. We have Metroid Prime 4, which was announced in 2018. No, it was announced in 2017. During E3, but it was in production from Bandai Namco, but apparently no one really liked it. that was on the team, it didn't meet the Metroid quality that they were going for. So they completely scrapped the game, and they are starting over on it. Which, you know, if it was going to be a bad game, I'm very glad that they took the time to redo Prime 4. But at the same time, you know, as a Metroid fan, we're lucky to get, you know, a game once every 4 or 5 years. Actually, we're lucky to get like one per console cycle, so I want them to take their time, make it the best it can be, but I also really want to play Metroid Prime 4. Hopping back to my video feed right now, I am currently hopping around a chamber trying to defeat a Metroid, and I'm taking my sweet time doing it, apparently. Alright, so another topic that I thought we could talk about a little bit was Metroid's involvement in the Super Smash Bros. Series. So obviously, Metroid's first representative was Samus in her power suit in Smash 64. Something I find kind of interesting that Masahiro Sakurai mentioned when he displayed Byleth, a lot of the younger producers at the HAL Laboratories, while they were developing Smash 64, didn't actually know who Samus was. And, oh wow, oof. I'm really bad at this game, apparently. Anyway, Metroid sales in Japan have never been nearly as good as they have been in America. But I think it's interesting that some of the members of the Smash Bros. Team didn't even know who Samus was until Sakurai had them put Samus in the game. So for Smash 64 and for Melee, the only representative was Samus. But then with Brawl, they added Zero Suit Samus as like a Final Smash switch. So after you use your Final Smash with Samus, you become Zero Samus. Then after you use it as Zero Suit Samus, you become regular Samus. Now, to me, what's interesting is that in Smash 4 they made them separate characters, which I understand, but they still didn't add anyone new. But then with Smash Ultimate, they finally did add 2 characters. They added Dark Samus, who was, you know, an Echo Fighter of Samus. But then they added Ridley. I did not expect them to add Ridley. I was in the camp that was like, yes, I would love it, but Ridley is huge in most of the games. Like, he towers above Samus in almost every single one, except for the original Metroid. And so I figured that it would never happen, but lo and behold, we got Ridley in Smash. In my footage just now, we we hit a dead end, because I found out that you do need the thermal visor to get out of this room once you collect that item. So I reloaded from where I got the Chozo artifact, and then we're just gonna head out of the Space Pirate Factory. If I remember correctly, I don't think we discover anything else important here. I just kind of stare at the map for a while and then go back and save. So that is where I will end my re-recording, and I'll probably just cut off the video feed somewhere. Thank you for sticking with me during this rather odd episode. But I promise that the one after this, I will make sure that it records properly so I don't have to do anything like this again. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.